The blood was still warm when Professor Zenth realized that everything the Galactic Council had taught about humans was catastrophically wrong. My name is Zenth-Ka, and until 3 rotations ago I believed myself to be one of the most accomplished xenobiologists in the Aryan Collective. We had studied 47 different species across 12 star systems. I had published papers on the behavioral patterns of the dreaded Skoran berserkers and successfully predicted the tribal migrations of the crystalline Vorthak nomads. My credentials were impeccable, my reputation stellar. None of that prepared me for the humans. I had been assigned to observe their kind at the Kepler Station Educational Facility, a supposedly safe environment where various species' offspring learned basic galactic citizenship. The humans called it college, which translated roughly to place where young beings pretend to gain wisdom while mostly engaging in recreational toxin consumption. The irony was not lost on me that I, a being who had studied death in all its forms, would learn its truest meaning from creatures who treated it like an old friend. The Kepler station hung suspended in the void between 2 dying stars, its massive bulk rotating slowly to generate artificial gravity. The educational facility occupied sections 7 through 15, a sprawling complex of interconnected corridors, lecture halls, and dormitory units that housed nearly 3,000 students from 18 different species. The air recyclers hummed constantly, mixing atmospheric requirements for beings who breathed everything from methane to pure oxygen. The result was a cocktail that satisfied no one but kept everyone alive, which seemed fitting for a place dedicated to universal understanding. My observation chamber overlooked Lecture Hall, Delta 7, where Human Studies 101 was conducted 3 times per standard cycle. The walls were a sterile white that reflected the harsh artificial lighting, creating an environment that somehow managed to be both clinical and oppressive. The scent of industrial cleaning agents could not quite mask the underlying odors of fear, anticipation, and what humans called stress sweat. Rows of adaptive seating accommodated beings ranging from the serpentine Sithrak to the massive, cube-shaped granite folk. The humans, as always, had clustered together near the middle of the room, their strange social bonding behaviors on full display. The first sign of trouble came during the morning attendance check. A new student had enrolled, transferred from the Outer Rim colonies with sealed academic records. This alone was unusual, as the bureaucracy typically required 17 different forms of documentation just to change dormitory assignments. The new arrival was human, naturally. They always were when things went sideways. Student designation Jake Morrison sat in the back row, and from my observation post, I could see what the others could not. His movements were too controlled, too precise. Where other humans fidgeted, slouched, or engaged in the peculiar ritual of checking their devices, Morrison remained perfectly still. His eyes, however, never stopped moving. Those eyes catalogued every exit, every potential weapon, every other being in the room with the methodical efficiency of a predator. I had seen similar behavior in Scholarian death hunters, but they were purpose-bred killing machines. This was supposedly just another human adolescent seeking higher education. The tension in the room was palpable, though I seemed to be the only one who noticed it. The instructor, Professor Welland, a well-meaning Altarian with too much faith in interspecies harmony, droned on about human cultural practices while completely missing the obvious signs of danger. The other humans in the class were typical of their species. Sarah Chen, a second-year student studying xenobiology like myself, sat 3 rows ahead taking meticulous notes. Her dedication was admirable, if naive. Marcus Thompson, a boisterous athlete, whose primary achievements seemed to involve throwing spherical objects through metal hoops, occupied the front row where he could participate enthusiastically, which meant asking questions that demonstrated he had not completed the assigned readings. Then there was Elena Vasquez, the group's unofficial leader, whose sharp wit and natural charisma had made her popular among multiple species. She possessed that peculiar human quality of making everyone around her feel both comfortable and slightly off balance, like standing on a ship's deck in calm seas. What struck me about these humans was not their individual traits, but their collective behavior. Without any apparent communication, they had unconsciously arranged themselves to maintain visual contact with each other and clear sight lines to the exits. They called it sitting with friends, but I recognized it as a defensive formation. Humans, I was beginning to understand, were never truly at ease. Even in their places of learning, some primitive part of their brain remained alert for threats. It was simultaneously paranoid and practical, traits that should have been mutually exclusive but somehow coexisted in their strange psychology. The transformation began during Professor Welland's lecture on human fight-or-flight responses. The irony would have been amusing if not for what followed. Morrison stood slowly, his movements so fluid it seemed almost choreographed. In his right hand, previously hidden beneath his jacket, was a weapon I had never seen before. It was clearly human in design, all harsh angles and brutal functionality. The metal gleamed under the artificial lights like a hungry predator's tooth. "Nobody move," Morrison said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that made every being in the room freeze instinctively. "This will be The weapon discharged with a sound like controlled thunder. The energy bolt struck Professor Welland's center mass, and the Altarian collapsed without a sound. The acrid smell of burned flesh and ozone filled the air, triggering panic responses across multiple species. But the humans, by all the cosmic forces, the humans, where I expected screaming, there was silence. Where I anticipated panic, there was calculation. Sarah Chen had already activated her personal communicator, broadcasting an emergency signal with coordinates and threat assessment. Marcus Thompson had positioned himself between the shooter and a cluster of smaller students, his athletic frame suddenly looking less decorative and more functional. Elena Vasquez locked eyes with Morrison and smiled. Actually smiled. "Bad day at home, Jake?" she asked, her tone conversational despite the weapon pointed in her direction. "Shut up," Morrison snarled, but his grip on the weapon had tightened. Uncertainty flickered across his features. "Did you know," Elena continued, shifting slightly to draw his attention while Sarah continued her emergency broadcast, "that Professor Welland has 4 children back on Altair Prime. Twins, actually. Just started their schooling cycle." The lecture hall fell into an unnatural quiet, broken only by the soft wheeze of the dying professor and the distant hum of the station's life support systems. Morrison's weapon remained trained on Elena, but his targeting had become less certain. His finger hovered over the firing mechanism, trembling with an emotion I could not identify. From my observation post, I could see what the others could not. Station security was moving through the corridors, but they were still at least 4 minutes away. The humans in the room seemed to understand this timing instinctively, their movements and positioning subtly shifting to account for the approaching help. But there was something else. Something in Morrison's posture, in the way he held the weapon, that suggested this was not a simple act of violence. The targeting was too random, the timing too public. This felt rehearsed, practiced, planned. The thought sent a chill through my exoskeleton. If this was part of a larger strategy, then the situation was far more dangerous than it appeared. I activated my own emergency protocols, preparing to transmit my observations to the collective authorities. That was when I noticed Elena's left hand, hidden from Morrison's view by her body position. Her fingers were moving in what looked like random fidgeting, but the pattern was too deliberate. She was communicating with the other humans using some form of silent hand language. The reply came from Marcus, a subtle shift in his stance that somehow conveyed acknowledgement and readiness. Sarah's response was even more subtle, a slight adjustment in her breathing pattern that the others seemed to understand perfectly. They were coordinating, without words, without technology, using nothing but instinct and shared understanding. They were preparing to act. Morrison's true target became clear when he shifted his aim toward the communications console at the front of the room. "Communications offline," he announced, firing a precise shot that destroyed the primary transmitter array. "Emergency response offline." Another shot eliminated the backup system. But what he did not know, what he could not have known, was that Sarah's personal communicator had already established a quantum-encrypted link with station security. The humans had not panicked. They had adapted. "You think you're trapped," Elena said, her voice carrying that strange human quality of confidence in the face of certain death. "But you made one mistake." Morrison's laugh was bitter. "What mistake?" "You assumed we would be afraid." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. I had studied enough predator species to recognize the shift, the moment when prey animals realized they were not in fact prey. Marcus moved first. his athletic training translating into an explosive leap that covered the distance between his position and Morrison's flank in less than 2 seconds. The weapon discharged wildly, the energy bolt scorching the ceiling and filling the air with the smell of superheated metal. Sarah threw herself at the emergency lockdown controls, sealing the room from external access, while simultaneously triggering the internal security protocols. The lights shifted to emergency mode, bathing everything in a red glow that made the humans look even more predatory. Elena simply stood up and walked toward Morrison with the kind of casual confidence that suggested she had done this before. What happened next challenged everything I thought I knew about violence, survival, and the nature of intelligent life. Morrison, trained killer though he was, found himself facing 3 humans who had transformed from students into something far more dangerous. They moved with coordination born not of training but of instinct, their actions flowing together like parts of a single organism. Marcus tackled Morrison from behind, his impact driving them both to the ground. The weapon skittered across the floor, spinning away from both combatants. Sarah kicked it further away, ensuring it remained out of reach while maintaining her position at the controls. But it was Elena who delivered the killing blow, both literally and philosophically. She knelt beside Morrison as Marcus held him down, her expression shifting from predatory focus to something that looked almost like compassion. "What's your real name?" she asked quietly. Morrison's response was a string of curses in 3 different languages, none of them complimentary. "I asked your real name," Elena repeated, her tone patient but firm. "Not your cover identity, not your mission designation. Your name." For a moment, Morrison's struggles ceased. Something in Elena's voice, some quality that transcended species barriers, seemed to reach past his training and conditioning. "David," he whispered. "David Chen." Sarah's sharp intake of breath was audible across the room. "Chen?" she said. "Are you her brother?" Elena finished. "Or cousin, maybe. The resemblance is subtle, but it's there if you know what to look for." The weapon had not been meant for random students. It had been meant for Sarah, specifically. Someone had sent Morrison David to eliminate a target, and that target was one of their own. The implications were staggering. Security forces breached the sealed doors exactly 14 minutes after the initial attack, expecting to find a massacre. Instead, they discovered Morrison secured with improvised restraints fashioned from clothing and furniture, the other students providing medical attention to Professor Welland, and the humans standing guard with the easy confidence of people who had simply handled an inconvenience. The lead security officer, a Scoran named Greth Val, whose species was renowned for their warrior culture, stopped in the doorway and stared. "What happened here?" he demanded. Elena looked up from where she was monitoring Professor Welland's vital signs. "Just a family disagreement," she said with that peculiar human tendency toward understatement. "Nothing we couldn't handle." As the security team processed the scene, I remained in my observation post, my mind reeling from what I had witnessed. The humans had not simply survived an assassination attempt. They had neutralized it with an efficiency that would have impressed professional military units. But there was something deeper here, something that went beyond mere combat effectiveness. The way they had communicated without words, the instant coordination, the transformation from students to protectors, it suggested capabilities that the Galactic Council had either overlooked or deliberately ignored. And the family connection. If Sarah had been specifically targeted, if someone considered her dangerous enough to warrant assassination, then what exactly were the humans hiding about their true nature? As I began compiling my report, one thought dominated all others. We had been studying the wrong species. We had been asking the wrong questions. The humans were not the primitive, barely civilized beings the Council believed them to be. They were something far more dangerous, far more capable, and far more unified than anyone had suspected. And tomorrow I would have to attend another lecture, sit in another observation post, and pretend that I had not just witnessed the most significant paradigm shift in xenobiological studies since the discovery of intelligent life itself. The blood was still warm, but it was not human blood that had been spilled. It was our illusions about them that lay dying on the classroom floor. 3 days after the incident, I received a message that made my primary heart stop beating. Professor Zenth-Ka, Your continued observations are no longer required. Reassignment pending. Galactic Council Educational Division. They were trying to silence me. After 47 years of faithful service to the collective, after publishing breakthrough research that had advanced interspecies understanding by decades, they wanted me gone because I had witnessed something I was not supposed to see. But I am Endorian, and we are nothing if not persistent. My species did not survive the Great Purges by accepting convenient lies or backing down when truth became inconvenient. If the Council wanted my silence, they would have to do far more than shuffle my assignment. I had spent the past 3 rotations analyzing every second of footage from the classroom incident, cross-referencing biometric data, communication patterns, and behavioral analyses. What I found disturbed me far more than the original attack. The humans had not simply reacted to danger. They had anticipated it, prepared for it, and neutralized it with a level of coordination that suggested extensive prior training. These were not ordinary students. They were something else entirely, masquerading as young academics while possessing skills that would make Skoran commandos envious. The detention level of Kepler Station existed in perpetual twilight, its corridors lit by strips of pale blue illumination that cast everything in an underwater glow. The air here carried different scents than the upper levels. Recycled atmosphere mixed with the metallic tang of security systems, and something else, something organic and unsettling that I had learned to associate with human stress pheromones. Cell Block 7 housed only one prisoner, David Chen, also known as Morrison, also known by at least 6 other identities that station security had uncovered during their investigation. The holding cell was designed for multiple species with adjustable atmospheric controls and neural dampening fields to prevent both physical and psychic escape attempts. Through the transparent aluminum barrier, I could observe the prisoner's behavior patterns. He sat motionless on the standard-issue sleeping platform, his breathing controlled and regular. His eyes remained closed, but the micro-expressions around his orbital cavities indicated active consciousness and heightened awareness. He was meditating, or perhaps preparing for something. The observation chamber where I conducted my research offered a clear view of both the detention area and the adjacent interview rooms. From here, I had watched as various council investigators attempted to extract information from the human assassin. Their methods were sophisticated, incorporating psychological pressure techniques that had proven effective on dozens of species. None of them worked on David Chen. The breakthrough came when Sarah Chen requested permission to interview the prisoner. Station security initially refused, citing obvious security concerns and potential emotional compromise. But Sarah possessed something the professional interrogators lacked. She was human, and more importantly, she was family. I positioned myself in the observation chamber as Sarah entered the detention area. The neural dampening fields remained active, but she moved with the same easy confidence she had displayed during the classroom attack. Her posture suggested complete comfort with the environment, as if she had been in similar situations before. David's eyes opened the moment she entered his line of sight. The micro-expressions that followed were fascinating. Recognition, relief, anger, and something that might have been shame, all cycling through his features in less than 2 seconds. "Hello, cousin," Sarah said, settling into the chair across from his cell with casual familiarity. "You look terrible." "You look alive," David replied. "That was not the plan. Plans change." Sarah's tone carried that peculiar human quality of finding humor in deadly serious situations, especially when they are really, really stupid plans. The conversation that followed challenged every assumption I had made about human family structures, loyalty patterns, and motivational hierarchies. "The collective thinks you are here to study xenobiology," David said, his voice carrying undertones. I was beginning to recognize as distinctly human skepticism, but we both know better. Sarah leaned back in her chair, a gesture that somehow managed to convey both relaxation and readiness for violence. "Do we? Because from where I sit, I have been attending classes, completing assignments, and learning about alien species. Seems like studying to me." "The Chen family does not send observers, Sarah. We send operatives." The implications of this statement sent a chill through my exoskeleton. The Chen family was not simply a human kinship group. It was some form of organizational structure with specific operational parameters. The question was, Operational for whom? Maybe, Sarah acknowledged. Or maybe, the family is finally learning that some missions require subtlety instead of violence. Novel concept, I know. David's laugh was bitter. Subtlety. Like your little performance 3 days ago? You and your friends turned a simple elimination into a public demonstration of human capabilities. The Council will ask questions. The Council already knows what we can do, Sarah replied. They have known for years. They just prefer to pretend otherwise because the truth makes them uncomfortable. And what truth is that? Sarah's smile was predatory. That we are not the primitive species they classify us as. That we never were. The conversation was interrupted by the wail of emergency sirens. Red lights began flashing throughout the detention level, casting shifting shadows that made everything look like a scene from some apocalyptic nightmare. The station's automated announcement system crackled to life with a message that made my secondary circulatory system freeze solid. Security breach in Cell Block 7. Lockdown protocols initiated. All personnel evacuate immediately. But there had been no breach. David remained secured in his cell, the neural dampening fields remained active, and Sarah sat calmly in her chair as if emergency alarms were nothing more than background music. That was when I realized the truth. This was not a security breach. This was a rescue operation. The first explosion came from the level above us. A controlled detonation that sent vibrations through the station's superstructure but caused no actual damage. It was designed to draw security forces away from the detention area, creating a window of opportunity. The second explosion was much closer, somewhere in the main corridor leading to Cell Block 7. This one was followed by the distinctive sound of energy weapons discharge and what could only be described as a running firefight. Right on schedule, Sarah observed, checking her chronometer with casual interest. David, you might want to step away from the cell barrier. Sarah, what have you done? What the family does best, she replied. We adapted. The third explosion was directly outside the detention area. The blast doors, designed to withstand assault by heavy weapons, lasted approximately 4 seconds before being reduced to superheated slag. Through the smoke and debris came 3 figures in form-fitting environmental suits, their movements coordinated with military precision. I recognized one of them immediately. Marcus Thompson, the supposedly simple-minded athlete who had helped subdue David 3 days earlier. The other 2 were unfamiliar, but their gear and tactics suggested professional military training. Elena Vasquez's voice came through their suit communicators, clear and authoritative. 60 seconds until station security arrives. Move. Marcus approached David's cell with a device I had never seen before. Its design clearly human in origin, but incorporating technology that should not have existed outside the most advanced research facilities. The energy matrix surrounding the cell began to fluctuate, its containment field wavering like heat distortion over summer pavement. Sarah, David said, his voice tight with an emotion I was beginning to recognize as human concern. The dampening fields are connected to the station's main power grid. If you overload them, the entire level loses life support, Sarah finished. I know. We have approximately 90 seconds before the atmosphere becomes unbreathable. Then why are you doing this? Sarah stood up, her movement fluid and purposeful. Because you are family. You idiot. And because the mission was never about eliminating me. It was about testing whether the Council could turn us against each other. The cell barrier collapsed with a sound like breaking glass. David stepped free, rubbing his wrists where the restraint fields had maintained contact. His first action was not to embrace his cousin or express gratitude for his rescue. Instead, he grabbed Sarah by the shoulders and shook her. The mission parameters were clear, he said. Terminate the operative. No exceptions. The mission parameters were wrong, Sarah replied. And you know it. Through my observation chamber's audio sensors, I could hear the approaching security forces. Their footsteps echoed through the corridors with mechanical precision, but there was something about their cadence that seemed off, too regular, too synchronized, as if they were not organic beings at all. Elena's voice crackled through the communicators again, but this time her tone carried a note of urgent alarm. Sarah, we have a problem. These are not station security forces. What are they? Marcus asked, his hands already moving to check his weapons. Synthetic constructs. Military grade. Someone activated the Council's emergency protocols. The implications hit me like a physical blow. The Council possessed synthetic soldiers, mechanical beings designed to eliminate threats to galactic stability. Their activation required unanimous consent from all member species and could only be authorized in cases of existential threat to the galactic order. Someone had convinced the Council that the humans represented exactly such a threat. "How many?" Sarah asked, her voice remaining calm despite the magnitude of the situation. 36 units, converging on this position from multiple vectors. Estimated contact in 45 seconds. David's expression shifted to something I had seen before during the classroom incident. The transformation from human student to something far more dangerous. "Sarah, the emergency protocols include atmospheric venting. They intend to eliminate everyone on this level, including our observer," Sarah said, glancing directly at my hidden position. My primary heart stopped beating for the second time in 3 days. They knew I was here. They had known all along. "Professor Zenth-Ka," Sarah continued, addressing me directly through the observation chamber's communication system. "I suggest you join us. Your current position is about to become extremely unhealthy." The choice before me was simple in its stark impossibility: remain in my observation post and face elimination by synthetic soldiers, or ally myself with humans who were apparently engaged in some form of rebellion against the Galactic Council itself. I chose survival. The observation chamber's emergency exit led directly into the detention area, a design feature intended to allow rapid evacuation during containment failures. I activated the manual override and stumbled into the corridor, my movements clumsy compared to the fluid grace of the humans around me. "Welcome to the revolution," Elena said, appearing beside me with equipment that definitely violated several galactic weapons treaties. "Try not to die, we need witnesses." "Revolution?" I managed to say, my vocal cords struggling with the concept. "The Council has been suppressing human advancement for decades," Sarah explained as Marcus distributed weapons to everyone present. "They classify us as a primitive species to justify limiting our technology, our expansion, our participation in galactic affairs, but we have been developing capabilities they do not know about." "Like what?" David smiled, and for the first time since I had met him, the expression seemed genuine. "Like the ability to hack synthetic soldier command protocols." The approaching footsteps had stopped. Through the corridor's acoustic sensors I could hear the distinctive whir of mechanical systems powering down. One by one the synthetic soldiers were shutting themselves off. "You did not break him out," I realized. "You let yourselves be tracked here so you could access the synthetic control network." "Now you are beginning to understand," Elena said. "We are not the primitive species the Council believes us to be. We are not even the same species they have been studying." "What do you mean?" Sarah looked at David, some silent communication passing between them. He nodded slowly. "We mean," Sarah said, "that the humans the Council has been observing, the ones they classify as barely civilized primates, are not the real human civilization. They are the equivalent of our rural populations, our frontier colonies, our deliberately maintained low-technology settlements." The implications staggered me. "Then what are you?" "We," David said, "are what happens when humans actually try." The station's main communication array activated with a signal I had never heard before, a complex harmonic pattern that seemed to vibrate through the superstructure itself. Over the intercom system, a voice spoke in perfect galactic standard, but with an accent that was unmistakably human. "Kepler Station, this is the Earth Defense Fleet vessel. Determination? We are requesting immediate diplomatic immunity for our personnel currently aboard your facility." Through the observation chamber's external viewports, I could see shapes materializing out of the void, massive vessels that had somehow approached the station without triggering any detection systems. Their design was sleek, predatory, and incorporated technological advances that should not have been possible with human industrial capacity. "That," Elena said with evident satisfaction, "is our ride home." "Home?" I asked. "Earth," Sarah replied. "The real Earth, the one the Council has never seen." As the rescue fleet took position around Kepler Station, I realized that everything I thought I knew about humans, about their capabilities, about their place in the galactic community, had been carefully constructed fiction. The question was, what else had the Council been lying about? And more importantly, if the humans were not what they seemed, what other species had been misrepresented, misclassified, or deliberately suppressed? The revolution Elena had mentioned was not just beginning. It had been in progress for decades, hidden beneath layers of deception and misdirection that made my head spin with their complexity. As we prepared to board the human vessel, I could not shake the feeling that I was about to witness the end of the galactic order as I knew it. The blood might have been warm 3 days ago, but what was spilling now was the lifeblood of an entire civilization built on lies. The first time I saw actual Earth, I understood why the Galactic Council had spent 3 centuries living in terror of a species they pretended to despise. My transformation from xenobiologist to reluctant revolutionary had taken exactly 6 days. 6 days since I watched humans demonstrate capabilities that redefined everything I understood about intelligence, adaptation, and survival. 6 days since I learned that my entire career had been built on studying carefully constructed lies. Now I stood aboard the Earth Defense Fleet vessel Determination, looking out at a blue-green world that bore no resemblance to the primitive backwater planet described in Council archives. The orbital infrastructure alone should have been impossible according to official human technological assessments. Massive ring stations circled the planet at multiple altitudes, their surfaces gleaming with energy collectors and manufacturing facilities that dwarfed anything in Council space. Captain Torres, a woman whose age was difficult to determine but whose competence was immediately obvious, had been assigned as my guide to actual human civilization. Her smile carried the same predatory quality I had learned to associate with humans, but tempered with something that might have been genuine sympathy. "Professor Zenth-Ka," she said, "welcome to the reality your council has been hiding from for 300 years. The transport shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere along carefully designated corridors that avoided the orbital defense platforms. I counted at least 40 separate weapon systems tracking our progress, their targeting arrays sophisticated enough to distinguish between authorized vessels and potential threats at distances that violated several laws of physics as I understood them. The planetary surface revealed cities that stretched beyond horizons, their architecture blending organic curves with geometric precision in ways that suggested advanced understanding of both engineering and aesthetics. Transportation networks moved with fluid efficiency, carrying volumes of traffic that should have resulted in complete systemic breakdown but instead flowed like choreographed performances. The air itself felt different as we landed, cleaner, somehow, but carrying undertones of industrial activity and energy generation on a scale that made my sensory organs struggle to process the input. This was not the struggling colonial world described in Council reports. This was the homeworld of a species that had mastered their environment so completely that the planet itself had become an extension of their technological capabilities. Sarah and David flanked me as we disembarked, their behavior subtly different now that they were on home territory. The casual alertness remained, but it was overlaid with something that looked like pride. They were showing off and they knew it. "The first thing visitors usually ask," Sarah said, "is how we kept this hidden." "How did you?" I managed to ask, my vocal cords still adapting to Earth's atmospheric composition. "Simple," David replied. "We gave the Council exactly what they expected to see." The Council facility on Earth was located in what humans called North America, a carefully maintained settlement that matched every stereotypical expectation about primitive human development. The buildings were constructed from local materials using traditional techniques. The technology was deliberately limited to basic computational systems, and the population maintained behavioral patterns consistent with a pre-spaceflight civilization. But as our transport approached the facility, I could see the truth beneath the facade. The primitive communications array was actually a sophisticated monitoring system capable of intercepting signals across multiple dimensional planes. The simple agricultural plots were testing grounds for biological warfare countermeasures. The quaint residential areas housed intelligence operatives whose mission was to observe and misdirect Council researchers. "For 3 centuries, Captain Torres explained, every Council expedition to Earth has been carefully guided to see exactly what we wanted them to see. Your researchers studied actors, professional performers trained to behave like the primitive species you expected to encounter. The implications were staggering. But the biological samples, the technological artifacts, the cultural recordings, all genuine, Sarah confirmed. We really do have populations that live simple lives by choice. We really do use traditional techniques in some locations. We really do value the behavioral patterns your researchers documented. We just do not limit ourselves to those things. The Council believed they were studying our entire civilization, David added. In reality, they were examining our equivalent of historical reenactment societies. Through the shuttle's viewports, I could see Council personnel moving through the facility below, conducting research with the earnest dedication of beings who believed they were advancing scientific understanding. They had no idea that their test subjects were laughing at them. Dr. Amanda Foster had been the primary Council liaison for human studies for the past 12 years. According to her official records, she was a simple anthropologist from the emerging human academic community, grateful for the opportunity to participate in galactic research programs. Her publications were well regarded, her methodology sound, and her conclusions perfectly aligned with Council expectations about human limitations. She was also, I learned, one of the most sophisticated intelligence operatives in known space. Professor Zenth-Ka, she said, greeting us at the facility's main entrance with a warm smile that made my exoskeleton crawl. What a pleasant surprise. I trust your observations at Kepler Station were educational? I repeated. Yes, that would be one way to describe them. I imagine you have questions. Several thousand. Dr. Foster's laugh was genuinely amused. Then perhaps we should start with the most important one. Why? Why what? Why did we maintain this deception for 3 centuries? Why did we allow the Council to classify us as primitive? Why did we accept limitations on our expansion, our technology, our participation in galactic affairs? The question had been consuming my thoughts since leaving Kepler Station. Yes. Why? Because, Dr. Foster said, we were studying you. The revelation hit like a physical blow. While the Council had been observing humans, cataloging their limitations and predicting their developmental trajectory, the humans had been conducting their own research project. They had been studying galactic civilization itself, mapping its weaknesses, understanding its power structures, and preparing for the day when they would choose to reveal their true capabilities. Every Council expedition to Earth generated massive amounts of data about galactic technology, political structures, and military capabilities. Dr. Foster explained as she led us through corridors that looked primitive but incorporated surveillance systems that made my optical nerves ache. Your researchers assumed they were teaching us about advanced civilization. In reality, they were providing us with intelligence about every major species in known space. You have been spying on the entire galaxy, I said. We have been learning, Sarah corrected. There is a difference. The difference became clear as we entered the facility's central command center. What had appeared from the outside to be a simple agricultural building was actually a sophisticated intelligence processing center. The walls were lined with displays showing real-time data from across the galaxy, troop movements, resource allocations, political negotiations, and technological developments. We know about the Skoran military buildup in the Outer Rim, Dr. Foster said, gesturing to one display. We know about the Altarian food shortages that your government is hiding from the general population. We know about the synthetic soldier program, the surveillance networks, and the systematic suppression of developing species. But most importantly, David added, we know about the other species like us. The central display shifted to show a galactic map marked with dozens of systems highlighted in different colors. Each color, Foster explained, represented a different category of species classification: primitive, developing, advanced, and one category that made my circulatory system freeze solid: suppressed. Suppressed? I whispered. Species whose true capabilities have been deliberately hidden or minimized. Captain Torres said, like the Vorthak crystalline nomads, who are not actually nomadic but maintain mobile populations to hide their permanent cities. Like the granite folk, whose cube-shaped forms are actually sophisticated mechanical suits housing beings that look nothing like their external appearance suggests. Like the Andorians, Sarah added quietly. The words hung in the air like toxic gas. What do you mean? Professor Zenth-Ka, Dr. Foster said gently. When did your species last undergo a technological revolution? When did you last develop a new form of space travel, or a breakthrough in energy generation, or a novel approach to interstellar communication? I tried to remember, but the answer was disturbing. We have not. Our technology has remained essentially static for centuries. Because the Council likes static, Captain Torres explained. They prefer a galaxy where every species has a clearly defined role, where technological advancement is controlled and predictable, where no one develops capabilities that might threaten the established order. But your species did advance, Sarah said. Your early space exploration technology was revolutionary. Your biological research capabilities were unprecedented. Your mathematical theories were centuries ahead of their time. How do you know this? Because we have copies of the original research, from before the Council's assistance programs began standardizing your educational systems and limiting your resource allocations. The implications were horrifying. My own species, my own civilization, had been deliberately stunted by the very organization that claimed to be fostering galactic development and cooperation. How many species? I asked. 47 confirmed cases of technological suppression, Dr. Foster replied, including yours. And you know this because we have been in contact with the real leadership of those species for decades. The versions of their governments that interact with the Council are as much a performance as our primitive Earth settlements. The communication array in the command center activated with a signal pattern. I recognized the emergency frequency used by the Galactic Council for species-wide announcements. But the voice that emerged was not the familiar tone of Council leadership. Citizens of the galaxy, the voice said in perfect galactic standard with a distinctly human accent, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Fleet. We are broadcasting on all Council frequencies to announce the formation of the Free Species Alliance. My primary heart stopped beating for what felt like the 100th time in a week. Sarah Chen. The same family name as my guides, but with a military rank that should not have existed in human organizational structures. For 3 centuries, the Admiral continued, the Galactic Council has maintained order through deception, suppression, and the systematic limitation of technological and social development. Today that era ends. The display screens around the command center lit up with incoming signals from across the galaxy. Species after species were announcing their withdrawal from Council authority and their allegiance to this new alliance. The Vortha tax, the Granite Folk, even my own Endorian collective. This is impossible, I whispered. This is inevitable, Dr. Foster corrected. The Council's system was never sustainable. Eventually, the suppressed species would develop enough to see through the deceptions. Eventually, someone would organize a response. But the coordination required, the planning, the risk. Humans, Sarah said with that predatory smile, are very good at long-term planning. The final revelation came when Admiral Chen's broadcast shifted to show the true scope of the Alliance's capabilities. Ship after ship materialized around every major Council stronghold, their designs incorporating technological advances that made Council vessels look like primitive toys. But these were not all human ships. The sleek curves of Vorthak crystal tech vessels moved alongside the geometric precision of true Granite Folk engineering. Endorian bioships that I had never seen before flew in formation with designs I did not recognize from species I had never encountered. How long, I asked? How long has this been planned? The groundwork began almost immediately after first contact with the Council, Captain Torres replied. Each species that encountered Council assistance programs began to suspect that something was wrong. It took decades to establish secure communication channels, longer to coordinate responses, but once we started sharing information, the pattern became obvious, David finished. The Council was not fostering development. They were preventing it. But why? What did they gain from keeping everyone primitive? Control, Sarah said simply. A galaxy full of species with roughly equivalent capabilities is much easier to manage than one where technological advancement proceeds naturally. No one develops weapons that can threaten Council authority. No one creates transportation systems that can bypass Council monitoring. No one builds communication networks that can organize resistance, except us, Dr. Foster added. Because we never stopped developing. We just hid our progress. Through the command center's external sensors, I could monitor the situation developing across the galaxy. Council forces were mobilizing, but their response was confused, uncoordinated. They had prepared for individual species rebellions, not a coordinated uprising involving nearly half the galaxy's intelligent civilizations. What happens now? I asked. Now, Admiral Chen's voice said from the communication array, we build the galaxy that should have existed all along, one where species develop according to their potential, not according to artificial limitations imposed by those who fear change. 3 months later, I stood in the same lecture hall on Kepler Station where this whole adventure had begun. But everything had changed. The Galactic Council had been dissolved, replaced by a confederation of species that governed through cooperation rather than control. The suppressed technologies had been shared, leading to advances in every field of knowledge. My own research had been revolutionized by access to data from species whose true capabilities had been hidden for centuries. The papers I was publishing now made my previous work look like childhood exercises. But the most significant change was in the students themselves. Humans, Endorians, Vorthak, Granite Folk, and dozens of other species sat together in classes that explored the real history of galactic civilization, the true capabilities of each member species, and the potential for collaborative development that had been suppressed for so long. Sarah Chen, no longer pretending to be a simple student, had become the station's new director of interspecies studies. Her first act had been to establish mandatory courses in advanced deception detection for all students, using the Council's own manipulation techniques as case studies. The goal, she explained to her first class, is to ensure that no species ever again accepts limitations imposed by others without questioning the motivations behind those limitations. David Chen, his identity as an intelligence operative now openly acknowledged, taught courses in applied skepticism that had become among the most popular on the station. Elena Vasquez had been promoted to head of station security, a position that gave her ample opportunity to implement the kind of defensive strategies that had saved us during the original classroom incident. As for me, I had been offered positions with 3 different research institutions, all of them eager to benefit from my experience, as one of the few beings who had witnessed the transition from the old order to the new one. I chose to remain at Kepler Station, where I could continue studying the most fascinating species in the galaxy, the ones who had been pretending to be primitive for 3 centuries while secretly organizing the liberation of half the known universe. The blood was no longer warm. The lies had been exposed, the deceptions revealed, the artificial limitations removed, and in their place, something genuinely magnificent was being born, a galactic civilization based on truth, cooperation, and the unlimited potential of species free to develop according to their actual capabilities rather than someone else's fears. The humans had taught us all a valuable lesson. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do to your enemies is exactly what they expect you to do, until you choose to stop.